Lightning splits the sky as 12-year-old Emma struggles against the ropes cutting into her wrists, the massive oak tree behind her creaking in the wind. Her stepfather, investment banker James Montgomery, towers over her with cold eyes, his $3,000 suit getting drenched as thunder rolls across the school grounds. From the shadows of the maintenance shed, Marcus Johnson's son, who everyone ignores because he's just the janitor's boy, watches in horror, his heart pounding against his ribs as he realizes what's really happening to his classmate. But what Marcus is about to discover in that shed will change everything and prove that sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. If you believe in standing up for what's right, even when the world thinks you're too small to matter, subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage, justice, and unexpected heroes who prove that the size of your bank account has nothing to do with the size of your heart. Marcus Johnson Jr. learned early that the best way to become invisible was to keep his head down and his mop moving. At 15, he knew every inch of Oak Ridge Private Academy's polished floors, every crack in its marble columns, and every secret its halls held after the final bell rang. His father always said, "Son, there's dignity in honest work." But Marcus couldn't help noticing how the other students looked right through him, as if the gray janitor's uniform he wore after classes made him disappear. That Tuesday afternoon, as storm clouds gathered outside the library's towering windows, Marcus watched Emma Montgomery from behind a bookshelf. She sat alone at her usual table, shoulders hunched over her calculus textbook, her designer backpack slumped beside her chair. Something had changed about her in the past year, since her father's death and her mother's rushed remarriage to James Montgomery, the investment banker whose name now graced the school's new science wing. Emma used to smile, used to captain the debate team, used to defend younger students when rich kids got mean. Now she wore long sleeves even in warm weather and flinched when classroom doors slammed. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Marcus wheeled his cleaning cart past her table. She didn't look up, but he noticed her hands trembling slightly as she turned a page. The storm was moving in fast, transforming the afternoon into an eerie twilight. Most students had already left, driven home in expensive cars or chauffeured SUVs. Even the teachers had hurried out, eager to beat the weather. Marcus's father was checking the gymnasium's roof for leaks, leaving Marcus to handle the library's closing routine. He had just started wiping down the study tables when the library's heavy oak doors swung open. James Montgomery strode in, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the floor, his steel gray suit impeccable despite the humidity. "Emma," Montgomery's voice carried that false warmth Marcus had learned to recognize in certain wealthy parents, the kind who donated buildings but couldn't remember their children's birthdays. "You were supposed to wait in the car." Emma's pencil stopped moving. I had homework. The debate team. "You quit debate months ago." Montgomery's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We discussed this. Your mother and I feel it's best if you focus on your recovery after your accident." Marcus pretended to scrub an already clean table, his heart pounding. He had heard about Emma's accident last spring, a fall down the manor's grand staircase that left her with a concussion and a broken arm. The same accident that somehow led to her dropping every extracurricular activity she'd once loved. "Get your things," Montgomery said, checking his Rolex. "We have a meeting with the insurance adjusters about your mother's estate. Can't be late." As Emma stood, her calculus textbook slipped from the table. It hit the floor with a sharp crack that made her jump. Before Montgomery could move, Marcus was already there, picking it up. "Here," he said softly, holding it out to Emma. Their eyes met for just a moment, and in that instant, Marcus saw something that made his blood run cold. Pure, undiluted fear. Montgomery stepped between them, snatching the book. "That's quite enough. Come along, Emma." He gripped her arm just above the elbow, steering her toward the door. "And you, boy, don't you have floors to mop?" The library fell silent except for the distant rumble of thunder and the hum of fluorescent lights. Marcus stood frozen, watching through the windows as Montgomery marched Emma across the parking lot toward his black Mercedes. The first fat drops of rain began to fall, speckling the glass like tears. His father's words echoed in his mind. Sometimes, son, seeing what others don't want you to see becomes a responsibility. The question is, what do you do with what you've seen? Lightning flashed again, closer now, illuminating the darkening campus. Marcus gripped his mop handle tighter, a decision crystallizing in his mind. He might be invisible to people like James Montgomery, but that just meant they wouldn't see him watching. And Marcus had a feeling that this storm was bringing more than just rain. The maintenance shed crouched at the edge of Oak Ridge's manicured grounds like an afterthought, its weathered walls a stark contrast to the school's gleaming architecture. Marcus approached it through the strengthening rain, his shoes squishing across the sodden grass. He needed to store his cleaning supplies before the storm hit full force, but something else pulled him toward the shed, a nagging feeling he couldn't shake. His father kept meticulous records of everything in that shed, every tool, every repair, every document related to the school's maintenance. Organization isn't just about knowing where things are, he'd always say. It's about knowing when things aren't where they should be. Lightning flickered as Marcus unlocked the heavy padlock. The shed's interior smelled of motor oil and damp wood, familiar and somehow comforting. He'd spent countless afternoons here doing homework while his father repaired equipment, learning the difference between Phillips and flathead screwdrivers, memorizing the proper dilution ratios for cleaning solutions. But tonight, something was off. The filing cabinet in the corner stood slightly ajar, its bottom drawer not quite closed. Marcus frowned. His father never left drawers open. It was one of his unbendable rules. Moving closer, he noticed scuff marks on the floor, as if someone had rushed through recently. Thunder cracked overhead as Marcus pulled the drawer open. Manila folders lined the metal tracks, each labeled in his father's precise handwriting. Plumbing, 2024. Electrical permits. Insurance documentation. The last folder looked thicker than usual, stuffed with papers that didn't belong. Marcus's hands trembled slightly as he lifted the folder. A stack of documents slid out, bearing letterheads he recognized from the news. Monarch Insurance Group, Montgomery Investment Partners, Estate Planning Services. Paper clipped to the front was a photograph that made his breath catch. Emma's mother, Catherine Montgomery, smiling at some charity event, her arm linked with James Montgomery's. The documents told a story that made Marcus's stomach turn. Insurance. Policies worth millions, all taken out months before Catherine's unexpected death from natural causes. Similar policies on Emma, with recent amendments increasing the coverage. Notes about the manor's grand staircase, about necessary renovations to the railings. A fresh thunderclap shook the shed's walls. Through the rain-streaked window, Marcus saw headlights sweep across the parking lot. The black Mercedes had returned. He quickly photographed the documents with his phone. His father had taught him always to keep evidence, and carefully returned everything to its exact position. As he closed the filing cabinet, voices carried through the storm, Montgomery's commanding tone, Emma's softer replies. Marcus eased the shed door open just enough to see them. Montgomery was leading Emma toward the massive oak tree that stood sentinel at the edge of the school grounds. Even through the rain, Marcus could see that Emma's steps were reluctant, her body language screaming silent protest. "It's for the best," Montgomery was saying, his voice nearly lost in the wind. "Your mother understood that in the end." Emma tried to pull away. "Please, I won't tell anyone about the papers. I promise." "Of course you won't." Montgomery reached into his suit jacket. "That's exactly what your mother said." The rope in Montgomery's hand glinted dully in another flash of lightning. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs as understanding crashed over him. The insurance policies, the accident on the stairs, Catherine Montgomery's convenient death. It was all connected. And now, during the worst storm of the year, James. Montgomery was about to arrange another tragic accident. Marcus felt the weight of his phone in his pocket, the damning documents now safely recorded. He thought of his father's words about responsibility, about doing what's right, even when it's hard. The rain plastered his clothes to his skin as he watched Montgomery force Emma toward the tree. He had a choice to make. He could stay hidden, protect himself, remain invisible as he'd learned to be. Or he could act. Thunder roared again and Marcus made his decision. He might be just the janitor's son, but right now, he was also the only person who could save Emma Montgomery's life. First, though, he needed backup. Pulling out his phone, he dialed 911 with shaking fingers, then sent the document photos to his father with a single message: "Get to the oak tree, hurry." The storm was about to break in more ways than one. The rope bit into Emma's wrists as Montgomery pulled it tight, securing her to the ancient oak's massive trunk. Rain lashed sideways now, driven by wind that howled through the branches overhead. Emma's designer uniform was soaked through, her dark hair plastered against her face, but the cold she felt went deeper than skin. "You really are so much like your mother," Montgomery said, checking the knots with the precision of someone who'd done this before. She didn't understand either, always asking questions about the account transfers, the insurance policies. His voice carried that same boardroom smoothness, as if he were discussing quarterly reports instead of murder. Some questions are better left unasked. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the campus below. From his position behind the maintenance shed, Marcus watched in horror as Montgomery stepped back to survey his work. The businessman pulled out his phone, checking something, probably the weather radar, Marcus realized. Timing would be everything for an accident. Emma's voice carried on the wind. "They'll know it wasn't natural. The police will see a tragic accident during a dangerous storm." Montgomery's laugh was soft, almost gentle. A troubled teen, still grieving her mother, wandering too close to an unstable tree. "I did warn you about going out in weather like this, didn't I? There are witnesses." Marcus thought of the documents in the shed, of Catherine Montgomery's smiling photograph. How many other accidents had this man arranged, his wealth and influence sweeping away any inconvenient questions? A massive thunderclap shook the ground. Above them, branches creaked ominously. The old oak's limbs were heavy, and the storm was reaching its peak. Marcus knew from his father's maintenance reports that several branches had been flagged for trimming. One good lightning strike, one strong gust. Emma must have realized it too. She thrashed against the ropes, her private school polish cracking. "Dad, please, I'm your daughter." "Stepdaughter," Montgomery corrected mildly. "And daughters should trust their father's judgment." He checked his watch, a casual gesture that made Marcus's blood boil. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to establish my alibi. I'll be in my office, deeply concerned when they tell me you ran off into the storm. The security cameras will confirm it." Marcus's phone vibrated, a text from his father. "Police 5 men's out. Where are you?" Another lightning strike. Closer this time. The thunder was instantaneous, deafening. Marcus saw Emma flinch, saw Montgomery turn to leave, saw his chance slipping away with every second. He thought of Emma defending younger students from bullies back before Montgomery's influence had dimmed her light. Remembered her being the only one who'd thanked him when he cleaned up spilled coffee in the cafeteria last fall. Small kindnesses that revealed a person's true character. Marcus's father had taught him about electrical safety during storms, about lightning seeking the highest points, about the importance of staying clear of trees. Right now, Emma was tied to the tallest oak on campus, its branches reaching into the storm like lightning rods. Time stretched like cold honey as Marcus weighed his options. The smart play was to wait for the police, for his father, for proper help. But the storm was peaking now, the oak's branches swaying dangerously. Emma's fear-filled eyes tracked Montgomery's retreating figure as he strode toward the administration building, each step taking him closer to his airtight alibi. She wouldn't survive 5 minutes. Marcus's feet were moving before his brain fully committed to the decision. He burst from behind the shed, sneakers slipping on wet grass, heart thundering in rhythm with the storm. Montgomery's head started to turn at the sound. Time slowed. Marcus saw everything with crystalline clarity, the surprise breaking through. Montgomery's corporate mask, Emma's eyes widening in recognition, the purple-white flicker of lightning illuminating them all in stark relief. "Hey!" The shout tore from Marcus's throat, raw and challenging. "The cameras might show you in your office, but my phone shows you here." Montgomery froze. In that moment of hesitation, Marcus saw something crack in the man's polished facade, saw the calculation behind his eyes shift from cleanup to containment. The wind rose to a shriek. Above them, a massive branch groaned. And Marcus Johnson, Jr., the invisible boy who mopped floors and faded into backgrounds, made himself impossible to ignore. The world narrowed to heartbeats and raindrops as Montgomery turned toward Marcus, his expensive shoes sliding slightly in the mud. The businessman's composure slipped for just a moment, revealing something dark and primitive beneath the Brooks Brothers suit. "Marcus Johnson's boy," Montgomery said, his voice carrying that same boardroom smoothness, though his eyes had gone hard as river stones. "Your father's been a loyal employee. It would be a shame if budget cuts forced us to eliminate his position." But Marcus wasn't listening. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "When you're scared, son, count your breaths. Fear is just your body telling you something matters." One breath. The phone felt heavy in his pocket, recording everything. 2 breaths. Emma's eyes met his, wide with a desperate hope that hurt to see. 3 breaths. "I saw the insurance papers," Marcus said, his voice steadier than he felt. "And I found the maintenance requests about the oak's weak branches. Pretty convenient timing for a tragic accident, right?" Lightning crackled overhead, and Emma screamed as a smaller branch crashed down nearby. Montgomery took a step toward Marcus, then stopped as another police siren wailed in the distance, closer than before. "Give me the phone, boy." Montgomery's mask slipped further, showing teeth. "Whatever you think you know, whatever you think you saw, you're just a janitor's son. Who do you think they'll believe?" Marcus had spent his whole life being invisible to men like Montgomery, watching them stride through the world as if they owned it. But his father had taught him something else, too. Truth doesn't care about bank accounts, son. It just waits for someone brave enough to speak it. The wind howled louder, and Marcus made his choice. He turned and ran, not away, but toward the administration building. Behind him, he heard Montgomery curse, heard Emma shout something lost to the storm. Marcus's feet pounded against the wet grass, each step carrying him closer to the building's security office. "Stop!" Montgomery's voice cracked like thunder. "I'll double your father's salary." Marcus didn't slow down. The security office would have cameras, witnesses, evidence that couldn't be buried under Montgomery's influence. Just 50 more yards. A hand grabbed his collar, yanking him backward. Marcus stumbled, his phone flying from his pocket and skittering across the wet pavement. Montgomery's fingers dug into his shoulder, spinning him around. "You stupid child," Montgomery hissed, rain running down his face like tears. "You have no idea what you're doing." But Marcus wasn't looking at Montgomery. His eyes were fixed on the figure emerging from the shadows behind the businessman, his father, Marcus Johnson Sr., holding a massive maintenance wrench like a war club. "Get your hands off my son," his father's voice cut through the storm, quiet but carrying the weight of years of dignified rage. "The police are 2 minutes out. The security cameras are already running, and I've got every maintenance report, every insurance document, every piece of evidence about Catherine's death right here." He held up his phone. "My boy was smart enough to send backups." Montgomery's grip loosened. More sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. The businessman's eyes darted between Marcus, his father, and the oak tree where Emma remained, tied. "It's over," Marcus said, his voice stronger now. "Maybe they wouldn't believe just a janitor's son. But they'll believe the evidence. They'll believe Emma. They'll believe the truth." Lightning flashed again, and in that stark illumination, Marcus saw the exact moment James Montgomery realized he'd lost. The mask cracked completely, showing the hollow man beneath. The businessman lunged for Marcus's fallen phone, but Marcus was faster. Years of mopping floors had taught him how to move. how to stay balanced on wet surfaces. He snatched the phone and backed away as red and blue lights began strobing across the campus. "You're just like her mother," Montgomery spat at Emma, never understanding the bigger picture. The estate was underwater, the company was failing. The insurance was our only way out. "Record all of this," Marcus's father said quietly, and Marcus's shaking fingers found his phone's video function. Every confession, every moment of Montgomery's unraveling, captured in digital clarity. The first police car crested the hill as a massive thunderclap shook the ground. Above them, the oak's weakened branches groaned. Marcus looked at Emma, still tied to the trunk, and knew they had seconds, not minutes. "Dad!" he shouted, already, running toward the tree. "The branch!" His father understood immediately. Together they sprinted through the rain as Montgomery stood frozen, watching his carefully constructed world crumble. The branch above Emma cracked like a gunshot. Time slowed to heartbeats again. 1, Marcus reached Emma. 2, his father's wrench found the ropes. 3, they pulled her clear as the massive branch crashed down exactly where she'd been standing. The storm's fury peaked, but Marcus barely noticed. He was watching Emma's face as she looked at the branch, at her stepfather, at the approaching police lights, watching as she realized she was finally, truly free. Sometimes, Marcus thought, the biggest acts of courage start with simply being willing to see. Red and blue lights painted the rain in alternating sweeps as police officers swarmed the scene. Emma sat in the back of an ambulance, a shock blanket draped over her shoulders, her eyes fixed on Montgomery as officers led him toward a waiting patrol car. The businessman's perfectly tailored suit was ruined, his carefully maintained facade washed away by the storm. Detective Sarah Martinez crouched before Emma, her weathered face gentle but determined. "You're safe now," she said, holding up a digital recorder. "Can you tell me what happened? Everything you remember?" Marcus watched from nearby, his father's strong hand on his shoulder, as Emma's story spilled out like the rain still falling around them. The accident that killed her mother, the mysterious changes to insurance policies, the strange phone calls Montgomery made late at night, the growing fear as she pieced things together. "He said I was too much like Mom," Emma's voice cracked. "Said I asked too many questions about the accounts, about where the money was going. Then he started talking about sending me to boarding school in Switzerland, about how accidents can happen anywhere." Martinez's expression remained professional, but her knuckles whitened around her notepad. "And tonight? He found out I'd discovered Mom's real insurance papers, the ones that proved—" Emma's breath hitched. "That proved. He'd planned it all along." Marcus stepped forward, pulling out his phone. "I have evidence," he said. "Photos of documents from the maintenance shed, video of his confession during the storm." Detective Martinez's eyebrows rose as she scrolled through Marcus's phone. "This is extensive." She looked at Marcus's father. "And you have backup copies?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus Sr. said quietly. "Everything's been uploaded to secure cloud storage, including maintenance reports showing that oak tree was marked for removal months ago due to storm danger. Mr. Montgomery specifically ordered us to delay the work." Lightning flickered in the distance as Martinez processed this. "The insurance angle matches our ongoing investigation into Catherine Montgomery's death," she said. "We've been building a case but couldn't prove intent until now." A commotion near the police car drew their attention. Montgomery was arguing with the officers, his voice carrying across the wet grass. "Do you have any idea who I am? I'm on the board of trustees. I donate millions to this school. And my father keeps it running," Marcus said loud enough to carry. "He sees everything you try to hide behind your money. We both do." Montgomery's head snapped toward them, his eyes burning with a hatred that made Marcus step back. But Emma stood up, letting the shock blanket fall. She walked toward her stepfather, stopping just out of reach. "Mom knew, didn't she?" Her voice was steady now. "That's why she started documenting the missing money. Why she left those papers where I'd find them. Your mother," Montgomery spat, "was a fool who couldn't understand necessity. The company was failing. The lifestyle you so enjoyed doesn't pay for itself." "Neither does murder," Detective Martinez said coldly. nodding to the officers. "Get him out of here." As they pushed Montgomery into the patrol car, Emma turned to Marcus. "You saw me," she said softly. "All this time, when I was trying to be invisible, trying to hide what was happening, you actually saw me." Marcus thought about all the times he'd watched her from behind his mop, noticed the changes, the fear, the silent calls for help. "Someone had to," he said simply. More police cars arrived, along with suited investigators who began stringing crime scene tape around the oak tree. Marcus's father spoke quietly with Detective Martinez, sharing access to years of maintenance records and security footage. "Your dad," Emma said, watching them. "He knew too, didn't he, about Mom?" Marcus nodded. "He keeps records of everything. After your mom died, he noticed patterns, things that didn't add up. He was building a case, trying to protect you, but we needed proof, and now you have it." Emma's smile was small but real, the first genuine one Marcus had seen in months. "Because the invisible people see everything, don't they?" Thunder rumbled again, but softer now, the storm moving away. Crime scene technicians photographed the fallen branch, the frayed ropes, the scuff marks in the mud, evidence of what almost happened, what would have happened if Marcus had chosen to remain invisible. Detective Martinez approached them again, her face serious. "Emma, we'll need you to come to the station. There's a lot to process, and we'll need to contact your nearest relatives." She paused. "And Marcus, we'll need your statement too. What you did tonight, it was incredibly brave." But Marcus wasn't feeling particularly brave. He was thinking about Monday morning, about walking those same halls, mopping those same floors, about how nothing and everything would be different. His father joined them, still holding the wrench that had helped free Emma. "Son," he said quietly, "remember what I told you about responsibility?" Marcus nodded. "That seeing what others don't want you to see makes you responsible for the truth." They finished together. The rain had finally stopped. Above them, the old oak's remaining branches swayed gently, its secrets exposed to the clearing sky. And in the distance, beyond the police lights, and crime scene tape. The first hints of dawn began to paint the clouds in shades of gold. Monday morning arrived with cruel brightness, sunlight streaming through Oak Ridge Academy's newly washed windows as if the storm had never happened. Marcus pushed his mop down the main hallway, hyper-aware of the whispers that followed him like shadows. The weekend's events had exploded across local news and social media. James Montgomery, prominent businessman and school trustee, arrested for attempted murder and suspected in his wife's death. "That's him," a sophomore whispered to her friend as they passed. "The janitor's kid who saved Emma Montgomery." Marcus kept his eyes on his work, but he couldn't help noticing how differently people looked at him now. The invisibility he'd worn like armor had been stripped away, leaving him exposed to their curious stares and not-so-subtle points. His father's voice crackled over his maintenance radio. "Marcus, they need a cleanup in the boardroom. Coffee spill?" The boardroom, where an emergency meeting of Oak Ridge's trustees was currently underway, discussing the Montgomery situation and its implications for the school. Marcus's stomach tightened as he wheeled his cart toward the administrative wing. Through the boardroom's frosted glass, he could make out heated voices. "Can't ignore the liability issues. Montgomery donated $1 million. What about the scholarship fund?" Marcus knocked softly before entering. The conversation died immediately. A dozen pairs of eyes turned to him, wealth and power incarnate, seated around a gleaming mahogany table. At the head sat Headmaster Richards, his usually commanding presence diminished by dark circles under his eyes. "Ah, young Mr. Johnson," Richards said, an odd note in his voice. "The coffee." Marcus spotted the spill near the center of the table, dark liquid seeping into expensive papers. As he began cleaning, the trustees resumed their discussion in lower tones. "The press is having a field day," one trustee muttered. "A janitor's son exposing corruption that we all missed or ignored." "The boy did what any of us should have done," another countered. "What we failed to do." Marcus focused on his work, but his ears caught everything. Discussions of new safety protocols, enhanced background checks for trustees, a complete audit of the scholarship foundation Montgomery had managed. Changes rippling out from that night. Under the oak tree, his phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from Emma. First day back, could use a friend, library at lunch. Since that night, they'd spoken several times at the police station during preliminary hearings in quiet moments between the chaos. Emma had moved in with her aunt, a kind-faced professor at the local university who'd always been suspicious of Montgomery's quick marriage to her sister. Need anything else? Marcus asked the room as he finished with the spill. Headmaster Richards cleared his throat. Actually, Mr. Johnson, would you mind staying? Your perspective on this situation might be valuable. The request hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus thought of all the times he'd cleaned this room after hours, reading discarded memos, observing the subtle power plays that shaped the school. He'd been invisible then, but now, of course, sir. He pulled out an empty chair, acutely aware of his gray uniform among their tailored suits. Tell us, one trustee leaned forward, how long had you suspected something was wrong with the Montgomery situation? Marcus met their eyes steadily. My father taught me that real seeing isn't just about looking, it's about paying attention. And when you pay attention at Oak Ridge, you notice things. What kinds of things? Richards pressed. Like how the maintenance budget for basic safety repairs kept getting cut, while the new science wing got gold-plated fixtures. Or how Emma stopped speaking in class right after her mother died, but nobody asked why. Or how Mr. Montgomery always scheduled his private meetings when he knew the security cameras in his office were down for maintenance. An uncomfortable silence fell. These were people used to managing problems with money and influence. But now they faced something different. Truth spoken plainly by someone they'd trained themselves not to see. We're discussing significant changes to school oversight, Richard said finally, including a student staff safety committee. Would you be interested in serving as our first student representative? Marcus thought of Emma waiting in the library, of his father's lessons about responsibility, of all the other invisible students who might need someone to truly see them. Yes, he said, but I have some conditions. The trustees stirred, some frowning at his boldness. But Richards nodded. Go on. The committee needs real power, not just for show, and it needs to include people from every part of Oak Ridge, not just the ones who can afford designer uniforms. As if on cue, his radio crackled again. Marcus, when you're done up there, Emma Montgomery's aunt is here with some papers for the detective. She's waiting in the library. Marcus stood, straightening his uniform. If you'll excuse me, I have somewhere to be, but I'm happy to continue this discussion. After all, he allowed himself a small smile. I see a lot from behind this mop. He left them with that thought, heading toward the library where Emma waited. Behind him, he heard the trustees' discussion resume with new urgency. Change was coming to Oak Ridge Academy, whether they were ready or not. Sometimes, he reflected, the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to remain invisible. The library had become their sanctuary in the weeks following Montgomery's arrest. Emma sat at her usual table, but everything else had changed. The fear that once haunted her posture had eased, replaced by a quiet determination as she sorted through folders of financial documents with her aunt, Professor Catherine Walsh, named for the sister she'd lost to Montgomery's schemes. Look at this, Professor Walsh said, holding up a bank statement. 3 days before your mother's death, he transferred $2 million to an offshore account. Classic premeditation pattern. Detective Martinez, who'd joined them for this session, nodded as she made notes. Matches the timeline we're building. The company was failing, but he'd taken out massive insurance policies on both Catherine and Emma. A double payout would have solved all his problems. Marcus watched from a nearby table, officially there to clean, but mostly providing silent support. Emma had asked him to stay, saying his presence helped her focus on the truth instead of the fear. I remember that day, Emma said softly, touching a date on the statement. Mom was upset about finding these transfers. She said she was going to confront him, get answers. Her voice caught. That was the last time I saw her alive. Professor Walsh wrapped an arm around her niece. Your mother was brilliant with numbers just like you. That's why he had to—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "Had to silence her," Emma finished. "Just like he tried to silence me," Marcus thought. About his own mother, lost to cancer when he was young. At least he'd had the comfort of a natural death, of time to say goodbye. Emma had been robbed even of that. "The DA's office is ready to move forward," Martinez said, her tone gentler than usual. "With your testimony, Emma, plus Marcus's evidence and the financial paper trail, we have a solid case. But it won't be easy. Montgomery's lawyers are already pushing back hard. They're claiming psychological stress." Professor Walsh's lip curled, saying the market crash and business pressures led to temporary insanity. "Let them." Emma's voice had steel in it now. "I have something they don't expect." She pulled out a small leather-bound book, her mother's diary. Mom didn't just keep financial records. She wrote everything down, every threat, every accident. Every time he tried to gaslight her into thinking she was paranoid. Her hands trembled slightly. "I found it the day before, the night at the oak tree. That's what he saw me reading." Martinez leaned forward. "Why didn't you mention this before?" "I needed time," Emma met her eyes, "to be strong enough to read it all, to understand." She looked at Marcus. "To know I had people I could trust with the truth." The detective carefully bagged the diary as evidence, but not before Emma read. One final entry aloud. "If anything happens to me, protect Emma. The truth is in the numbers, in the patterns he thinks no one sees. My daughter sees them. That's why I fear for her most." Marcus watched a single tear track down Emma's cheek. "She knew," Emma whispered. "She was trying to build a case, just like Marcus's dad. If I had just understood sooner." "Hey," Marcus spoke for the first time. "Remember what my dad always says? The truth doesn't have a timeline. It just waits for the right moment to be seen." Professor Walsh smiled at him. "Your father is a wise man, Marcus. Speaking of which," she pulled out another folder. "We found something interesting in the maintenance records he kept." The folder contained years of work orders, each meticulously documented. Patterns emerged. Montgomery repeatedly canceling safety inspections, redirecting maintenance funds, creating hazardous conditions that could be exploited. "The oak tree wasn't his first attempt," Martinez said grimly. "Look at these brake lines. Inspection delays on Catherine's car, the convenient timing of that gas leak in their summer house. A pattern of engineered accidents," Professor Walsh finished, "all perfectly documented by a man Montgomery never thought would be watching." Emma reached for Marcus's hand across the table. "Thank you," she said simply, "for seeing what others wouldn't, for being brave enough to act." Before Marcus could respond, his father's voice came through on the radio. "Marcus, the DA's here with some questions about the maintenance records. Could use your help in the office." As Marcus stood to leave, Emma called after him. "Movie night. Still on for Saturday? Aunt Catherine makes amazing popcorn." He smiled. "Wouldn't miss it." Walking through the library's familiar stacks, Marcus reflected on how much had changed. The invisible barriers between their worlds had crumbled, washed away by truth and trust and simple human connection. Behind him, he heard Emma laugh at something her aunt said, a clear, healing sound that echoed through the library like sunlight breaking through clouds. Sometimes, he realized, the best kind of justice isn't just about punishing the guilty. It's about giving survivors back their voice, their joy, their right to be seen. And sometimes, the simplest act of seeing someone, really seeing them, can change everything. The Montgomery case had transformed Oak Ridge Academy in ways no one could have predicted. As Marcus cleaned the trophy cases outside the main office, he watched students gather around a new bulletin board titled "Speak Up, Stand Up." Photos, notes, and stories covered its surface. Testimonials from students who'd faced bullying, discrimination, or abuse. In the center hung a simple quote, "The truth just waits for someone brave enough to speak it." "Your father's words are inspiring quite a movement," Headmaster Richard said, appearing beside Marcus. The administrator looked different these days, less polished, more human, though I suspect he never imagined they'd become the school's new motto. Marcus nodded, thinking of the changes he'd witnessed in the past month. The Student Staff Safety Committee had already implemented anonymous reporting systems and mandatory ethics training for all trustees. More significantly, the school's culture was shifting, with students from different social circles beginning to truly see each other. "The DA's office called this morning," Richards continued. "They're hoping you'll testify about the maintenance records at Montgomery's trial next month." Marcus's stomach tightened. He'd known this was coming, but the reality of facing Montgomery in court, of having to relive that stormy night, made his hands shake slightly as he wiped down the glass. "I'll do it," he said quietly. "Emma shouldn't have to face him alone." "Speaking of Emma," Richards gestured toward the entrance, where Emma was helping a younger student put up another story on the bulletin board. She moved with growing confidence, these days her voice carrying across the hallway as she encouraged the nervous freshman. "Your story matters," Emma was saying. "Every truth matters, no matter how small it seems." The freshman, a scholarship student Marcus recognized from his father's mentoring program, squared her shoulders and pinned her note to the board. Emma gave her a quick hug before turning to join Marcus and the headmaster. "Mr. Richards," she greeted him with a polite nod. "I hope you're planning to attend today's safety committee meeting. We're discussing some interesting findings from the student survey." Richards smiled wryly. "Wouldn't dare miss it. Your aunt's statistical analysis of bullying patterns was quite illuminating." As the headmaster walked away, Emma turned to Marcus. "Ready for lunch?" Aunt Catherine packed extra of her famous chocolate chip cookies. Their usual library table had become a gathering spot. Today they were joined by Sarah Chen, editor of the school newspaper, and Diego Rodriguez, detective, Martinez's son, who'd transferred to Oak Ridge after his mother took on the Montgomery case. "Look at this," Sarah spread out the latest draft of her investigative piece. "More families coming forward with stories about Montgomery's financial schemes. He wasn't just targeting wealthy widows. He was skimming from scholarship funds, athletic budgets, even the school's emergency maintenance account." Diego nodded grimly. "Mom says the fraud charges alone could put him away for decades. But the attempted murder charges," he glanced at Emma, "those are what will really end him." Emma's hands trembled slightly as she opened her lunch bag, but her voice was steady. "The DA wants me to read parts of Mom's diary in court to show the pattern of abuse, the escalation." She pulled out an extra cookie and handed it to Marcus. Will you sit where I can see you when I testify?" "Front row," Marcus promised. "Dad, too. He's been organizing the maintenance staff to attend in shifts, so someone will always be there." Sarah's pencil moved rapidly across her notepad. "The support from the working staff has been incredible. Any chance I could quote your father for the article? His perspective on how privilege and power can blind people to obvious wrongdoing." "Speaking of privilege," Diego interrupted, pointing toward the hallway. Through the library windows, they could see a group of students gathering around the bulletin board. But these weren't there to share stories. Led by Montgomery's nephew Bradley, they were trying to take down some of the posted testimonials. Before Marcus could move, Emma was already striding toward the door. He hurried after her, remembering another confrontation, another choice between staying silent and standing up. "What do you think you're doing?" Emma's voice carried that same steel she'd found during the investigation. Bradley turned, his face flushing. "This trash is ruining the school's reputation," he snapped. "My uncle. Your uncle is a murderer," Emma cut him off. "And every story on this board is here because people like him thought their money made them untouchable." Other students were gathering now, phones recording the confrontation. Bradley looked around, suddenly aware of the audience. "You don't understand," he tried. "Our families built this school, and my father keeps it standing," Marcus said, quietly, stepping beside Emma. "Every story here matters. Every truth deserves to be seen." Bradley's shoulders slumped as he recognized defeat. The crowd of students had grown, many wearing the blue ribbons that had become a symbol of solidarity with abuse survivors. Some began adding new stories to the board right in front of him. "This isn't over," Bradley muttered, as he walked away. "No," Emma agreed, watching him go. "It's just beginning." She turned to the gathered students, her voice carrying down the hallway. "Anyone who wants to share their story, we're having a support group meeting after school. You don't have to face anything alone anymore." Marcus stood beside her, watching truth after truth go up on that board. Sometimes, he realized, the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of courage, like finally letting yourself be seen. The courthouse steps teemed with reporters on the trial's opening day, their cameras tracking James Montgomery's arrival in a perfectly tailored prison jumpsuit that somehow still managed to look expensive. His team of lawyers flanked him like an honor guard, their briefcases bulging with motions to dismiss, character witnesses, and psychiatric evaluations claiming temporary insanity. Marcus sat between his father and Emma in the cramped courtroom, watching Montgomery work the room even in shackles. The businessman nodded to former colleagues, smiled reassuringly at wealthy supporters, played every angle except remorse. His performance was almost perfect, but Marcus had learned to see the cracks in powerful men's facades. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Maria Torres entered. She was known for her no-nonsense approach to white-collar crime, her dark eyes missing nothing as she surveyed the packed gallery. "Your Honor," Montgomery's lead attorney began, "we move to dismiss based on insufficient evidence and procedural—" "Save it, Mr. Patterson," Judge Torres cut him off. "I've reviewed your motions, all 47 of them. This trial will proceed." She turned to the jury. "You'll hear evidence of attempted murder, financial fraud, and conspiracy relating to the death of Catherine Montgomery. You'll be asked to separate fact from privilege, truth from influence. Pay attention." The prosecutor, a sharp-featured woman named Helen Chen, approached the podium. "This case isn't just about attempted murder," she began. "It's about power. About a man who thought his wealth made him untouchable, who saw other people's lives as mere figures in a spreadsheet." Montgomery's mask slipped for just a moment. A flash of rage, quickly hidden behind practiced concern, but Marcus saw it. And from Emma's slight intake of breath, she had too. "The defense will try to paint James Montgomery as a victim of circumstance," Chen continued. "They'll talk about market pressures, about temporary insanity, about his contributions to the community. But actions speak louder than donations." She projected a photograph onto the courtroom screen, Catherine Montgomery's smiling face at a charity gala, taken weeks before her death. This was a woman who noticed discrepancies in her husband's accounts, who started asking questions, who kept a diary of his increasingly erratic behavior. Another photo appeared, the oak tree at Oak Ridge, police tape wrapped around its massive trunk. And when her daughter found that diary, started piecing together the same pattern, Mr. Montgomery tried to silence her the same way. But he didn't count on someone watching, someone he'd trained himself not to see. Marcus felt the jury's eyes turn to him. He sat straighter, remembering his father's words about dignity in honest work. Montgomery's attorney rose for his opening statement, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "My client is a pillar of the community, a job creator, a philanthropist. Yes, he faced significant business pressures. Yes, he made mistakes. But the prosecution's theory of premeditated murder is pure fantasy, built on the testimony of a teenage janitor and a troubled young girl." Emma's aunt, sitting directly behind them, made a soft sound of disgust. But Emma herself remained steady, her eyes fixed on her stepfather's back. She'd grown stronger through this process, turning her pain into purpose. "The maintenance records," Patterson continued, "could have been altered. The so-called confession during the storm could have been misheard. The diary," he paused dramatically, "could have been written by anyone, at any time." Marcus watched Montgomery during this performance. The businessman sat perfectly still, but his manicured fingers tapped a steady rhythm on the defense table. The same nervous tell Marcus had noticed during board meetings when things weren't going his way. Judge Torres called a brief recess before witness testimony would begin. In the hallway, reporters swarmed around Montgomery's legal team while Detective Martinez conferred quietly with the prosecutor. "You okay?" Marcus asked Emma as they waited by the water fountain. She nodded, touching the locket that had belonged to her mother. "I used to be so afraid of him, of his money, his influence, his anger. But now," she smiled slightly, "now I see him for what he really is, small." Marcus understood. Strip away the expensive suits, the political connections, the cultivated charm, and what remained was just a man who thought wealth could substitute for humanity. First witness after recess, Chen approached them. "Marcus, you ready?" He thought about all the times he'd mopped floors while Montgomery held court in the boardroom, all the documents his father had carefully preserved, all the moments leading to this one. "Ready?" he said. As they filed back into the courtroom, Marcus caught his father's eye. The older man nodded once, pride evident in his weathered face. They had spent years being invisible to men like Montgomery, watching and waiting and keeping careful records. Now it was time to be seen. The witness stand felt exposed, like standing in a spotlight. Marcus straightened his tie, his father's borrowed for the occasion, and faced the crowded courtroom. He'd never spoken in front of so many people before, but he remembered Emma's words from that morning. "Just tell the truth. That's all any of us can do." Prosecutor Chen approached, her heels clicking against the polished floor. "Please state your name and occupation for the record." "Marcus Johnson, Jr. I work as a maintenance assistant at Oak Ridge Academy after school hours." "And how long have you worked there?" 3 years, since I was 12. My father's the head of maintenance. He taught me everything I know about the job." Chen nodded, establishing the foundation. "Including record keeping?" "Yes, ma'am. Dad always says proper documentation keeps everyone honest and safe." From the defense table, Montgomery's lip curled slightly, a micro-expression of contempt that Marcus had seen countless times when the businessman dealt with the help. "Tell us about the maintenance shed records," Chen prompted. Marcus described finding the insurance documents, explaining how years of working in the building had taught him to notice when things were out of place. His voice grew stronger as he spoke about patterns, canceled safety inspections, delayed repairs, mysterious budget cuts that always seemed to target critical infrastructure. "And the oak tree?" Chen asked. "What made it significant?" "It had been flagged for removal months earlier. Weak branches, storm danger, but Mr. Montgomery specifically ordered the work delayed." Marcus met the businessman's eyes. He even had the security camera in that area disabled for maintenance issues. Montgomery's attorney shot to his feet. "Objection, speculation." "Overruled," Judge Torres said. "The witness is stating documented facts." Chen projected a series of maintenance reports onto the courtroom screen. "Can you identify these documents?" "Yes. Those are my father's original reports about the oak tree. See his signature there? And that's Mr. Montgomery's signature below, denying the removal request 3 separate times." The jury leaned forward, studying the evidence. One woman frowned, making careful notes. "Now," Chen's voice softened, "tell us about the night of April 15th. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of Emma's gaze. "I was storing supplies in the maintenance shed when I saw Mr. Montgomery leading Emma toward the oak tree. Something felt wrong. The storm was getting bad, and Emma looked scared." He described finding the documents, making the connection, calling the police. His voice caught slightly when he reached the moment of confrontation. "Mr. Montgomery tried to buy my silence, offered to double my father's salary if I gave him my phone with the evidence. And why didn't you? Because some things matter more than money. Like truth, like doing what's right." Montgomery's mask slipped further, his face darkening. His attorney rose for a cross-examination, armed with questions designed to discredit and diminish. "You're 15, correct? No formal education in finance or business?" "No, sir. Just what I've learned watching and listening." "Watching and listening while cleaning floors." The attorney's smile was razor-sharp. Rather convenient that a teenage janitor just happened to find exactly the evidence needed. "Objection," Chen called, argumentative. "Sustained," Judge Torres warned. "Counsel, watch your tone." The attorney switched tactics. "Isn't it possible you misinterpreted what you saw? That a man under tremendous business pressure simply took his stepdaughter for a walk? With rope? Marcus countered evenly. After threatening her about finding her mother's diary? After disabling security cameras and delaying tree removal? He leaned forward slightly. Sir, I may just be a janitor's son, but I know the difference between a walk and an attempted murder. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Montgomery's fingers drummed faster on the table, his composed facade cracking further. Your father's job depends on the school's funding, the attorney pressed. Funding that my client largely provided. Isn't it possible this testimony was encouraged to protect that position? Marcus felt a flash of anger, but his father's training held. Stay calm. Speak truth. My father taught me that honest work deserves honest pay. That real wealth isn't about money, it's about being able to face yourself in the mirror each morning. He gestured to the maintenance report still displayed on the screen. Every document there tells a story. Every canceled inspection, every delayed repair, every time Mr. Montgomery chose profit over safety. The truth was always there. Someone just had to be willing to see it. And you expect the jury to believe that you, a part-time teenage custodian, saw what boards of directors and financial auditors missed? Yes, Marcus said simply, because people like Mr. Montgomery train themselves not to see people like me. We're invisible to them, which means we see everything. The attorney opened his mouth to continue, but Montgomery suddenly stood, his chains rattling. This is absurd. I built that school. I made it what it is, and you're letting this janitor's brat tell lies about Mr. Montgomery. Judge Torres's gavel cracked like thunder. Control yourself or you'll be removed. But the damage was done. The jury had seen behind the mask, glimpsed the rage beneath the polished exterior. As bailiffs guided Montgomery back to his seat, Marcus caught Emma's eye. She smiled slightly, nodding her encouragement. Sometimes the biggest truths come from the smallest voices, if you're brave enough to speak them. The leather-bound diary sat on the witness stand like a time bomb. Emma's fingers trembled slightly as she touched its worn cover, but her voice remained steady as she was sworn in. From his place in the front row, Marcus could see the subtle changes in her posture. No longer the frightened girl from the storm, but a young woman ready to speak her truth. Miss Montgomery, Prosecutor Chen began gently, please tell us about when you first found your mother's diary. Emma glanced at her aunt, drawing strength from her presence. It was hidden in Mom's old jewelry box underneath a false bottom. I found it the day before the incident at the oak tree. And what made you look there? Things weren't adding up. The story about Mom's death, it never felt right. And then I started noticing the same patterns happening to me. The isolation, the accidents, the way he would explain away everything with his perfect smile and convenient excuses. Montgomery shifted in his seat, but Emma didn't look at him. Her focus remained on the diary, on her mother's last gift to her. Would you read the entry from March 15th of last year? Jen asked. 1 week before your mother's death. Emma opened to a marked page, her mother's elegant handwriting filling the cream-colored paper. James is moving money again, she read. Large transfers to accounts I can't trace. When I asked about the insurance policies, he said I was being paranoid, that I should trust him to handle the finances. But I've seen the company reports. We're not just in trouble. We're drowning. She took a breath before continuing. He watches me constantly now. The accident with the car brakes last week wasn't an accident at all. I found the maintenance records. They were tampered with. I have to protect Emma. She sees patterns like I do. That makes her a threat to him. The courtroom was utterly silent. Even Montgomery's expensive lawyers had stilled their usual paper shuffling. The next entry, please, Chen prompted softly. March 20th. I've gathered all the evidence I can. Bank statements, insurance documents, maintenance records that prove the accidents were deliberate. Emma will find this diary when she's ready. When she starts asking the same questions I did. Baby, if you're reading this, trust your instincts. Your mind sees truth in numbers, just like mine. That's not paranoia, that's power, Emma's voice caught. And James, if you find this first, you underestimated us. Women aren't entries in your ledger. We're not problems to be solved with convenient accidents. The truth always finds its voice. 2 days later, Chen said quietly, Catherine Montgomery was found dead at the bottom of the manor's grand staircase. Can you tell us about that night? I was at debate practice. Emma's hands clenched around the diary. When I got home, he was already talking to the police. Perfect performance, grieving husband, concerned father. He even cried on cue. Objection. Montgomery's attorney stood. This is speculation from a traumatized teenager. Overruled. Judge Torres's eyes were sharp. The witness is recounting her direct observations, Emma continued, stronger now. After Mom died, things changed quickly. I was pulled from debate team, from student council. For my own good, he said, while I process my grief. But really, it was to isolate me, to keep me from asking questions. And when you found the diary, everything clicked. The pattern Mom saw, it was happening again. The new insurance policies in my name, the convenient accidents, the way he'd started talking about sending me to boarding school in Switzerland. She looked directly at Montgomery for the first time. He was going to kill me, just like he killed her. But he didn't count on Marcus seeing the truth. Montgomery surged to his feet again. You ungrateful little... Mr. Montgomery, Judge Torres's voice cracked like a whip. One more outburst and you'll be removed from this courtroom. Emma didn't flinch. The scared girl who'd once been tied to an oak tree was gone, replaced by her mother's daughter, strong, clear-eyed, unafraid of truth. The diary wasn't just evidence, she continued. It was Mom's voice, reaching through time to protect me, to remind me that seeing patterns, others. One to hide isn't weakness, it's strength. Chen projected a final document onto the screen. Catherine Montgomery's last bank statement showing massive transfers the day of her death. One last question, the prosecutor said. What do you see in these numbers? Emma studied the statement, her analyst's mind engaging. The transfers were timed exactly 3 hours before Mom's estimated time of death. But look at the amounts. $2,347,891. Mom was a mathematician. She loved number patterns. The digits add up to 34, then 7. Her birthday was July 34th. She coded her last message into the transfer amounts, knowing I'd understand. A soft murmur ran through the jury. Montgomery's face had gone chalk white, his mask completely shattered. Even in her final hours, Emma's voice carried to every corner of the courtroom. My mother was leaving breadcrumbs of truth. Not just for me, but for everyone. Because that's what truth does. It waits to be seen by those brave enough to look. As Emma stepped down from the witness stand, she walked past Montgomery without a glance, her mother's diary pressed against her heart, its pages finally speaking their long-held truth to the world. Marcus watched her rejoin her aunt, saw them embrace through tears of relief and vindication. Sometimes he realized the greatest courage isn't in fighting power, it's in speaking truth to it, no matter the cost. The trial's third week brought a parade of witnesses that stripped away Montgomery's carefully constructed facade layer by layer. Marcus watched from his usual seat as Detective Martinez took the stand, spreading crime scene photos across the prosecution's table with methodical precision. The pattern was there all along, Martinez testified, pointing to timeline charts. Every accident corresponded with an insurance policy, every death with a financial crisis. We just needed someone to connect the dots. Montgomery sat between his lawyers, his prison jumpsuit now wrinkled, his usual polish beginning to tarnish. The businessman's eyes darted between witnesses like a cornered animal's, his fingers constantly moving, straightening his collar, adjusting. Papers drumming against the table. Tell us about the brake lines, Prosecutor Chen prompted. Martinez gestured to a mechanical diagram. Catherine Montgomery's car showed clear signs of tampering. The same pattern appeared in 3 other cases we've now linked to the defendant, wealthy women who died in tragic accidents after investing with Montgomery Securities. The jury leaned forward as Martinez detailed each case. A widow who'd slipped from her balcony after questioning investment returns. A retired judge who'd died in a household accident while investigating pension fund discrepancies. Each death perfectly timed. Each investigation quietly closed after generous donations to various police charities. Money builds impressive. Walls, Martinez said, her disgust evident, until someone decides to look behind them. During a brief recess, Marcus overheard Montgomery's legal team arguing in hushed voices near the water fountain. Losing control of the narrative, juries completely turned out. Might be time to consider a plea. No deals. Montgomery's voice was razor sharp. I still have cards to play. Marcus caught Emma's eye across the hallway. She'd been taking notes throughout the trial, documenting every revelation, every pattern, turning her inherited gift for analysis toward the pursuit of justice. Back in session, the prosecution called their forensic accountant. Dr. Sarah Williams adjusted her glasses as she walked the jury through years of financial records. Mr. Montgomery didn't just kill for insurance money, she explained, highlighting transactions on the overhead screen. He was running a complex Ponzi scheme through the Oak Ridge Academy Endowment Fund. New donations covered stolen investments, while tragic accidents eliminated anyone who asked too many questions. She projected Catherine's final bank transfers. Mrs. Montgomery wasn't just documenting fraud, she was creating an evidence trail, the numbered transfers, the coded messages in her diary. She turned her own murder investigation into a mathematical proof of guilt. Montgomery's attorney tried to obscure the evidence in technical jargon, but Dr. Williams remained unshakable. Numbers don't lie, counselor. They simply wait for someone to read them correctly. The devastating testimony continued as former Montgomery Securities employees took the stand. A junior accountant described shredding documents at midnight. A secretary recalled mysterious meetings with insurance adjusters. A maintenance worker from Montgomery's office building remembered unusual requests to disable security cameras. Each small truth added to the larger pattern, like pixels forming a clear picture of corruption. But it was the school nurse's testimony that finally shattered Montgomery's composure. Emma had been coming to my office more frequently, the nurse recalled. Mysterious bruises, anxiety attacks. When I tried to file reports, Mr. Montgomery always had an explanation, always made me feel foolish for worrying. She twisted her hands in her lap. I should have seen it, should have done something. You weren't the only one he fooled, Chen said gently. No, the nurse's voice strengthened. But I was one of the people who looked away, who chose not to see because seeing would mean acting, and acting would mean facing someone powerful. From the defense table came a sharp crack. Montgomery had snapped his pencil in half. This is ridiculous, he burst out. You're also concerned about one spoiled teenager? Do you have any idea how many children my donations have helped? How many scholarships? Mr. Montgomery, Judge Torres's warning came too late. I built that school. I created opportunities, a few necessary sacrifices for the greater good. His voice cut off as his lawyers physically restrained him, but the damage was done. In the shocked silence that followed, Marcus watched the last of Montgomery's influence evaporate. The mighty businessman had been replaced by something smaller, darker, a creature of spreadsheets and schemes who'd forgotten that human lives weren't entries in a ledger. During the day's final recess, Emma approached Marcus in the hallway. Did you see his face? She asked quietly. When the nurse was testifying, Marcus nodded. Same look he had that night in the storm, when he realized someone was finally watching. Mom would have loved this, Emma smiled sadly. All her careful patterns, her mathematical breadcrumbs. She made sure the truth had witnesses, made sure I wouldn't face him alone. Marcus thought about his own role as a witness, how years of invisible observation had prepared him to see, to speak, to act when it mattered most. Truth finds its moments, he said, echoing his father's wisdom and its voices. The bailiff called them back into session, where more witnesses waited to add their pieces to the puzzle. Montgomery's walls were crumbling, and behind them stood something both smaller and more terrible than anyone had imagined. But that, Marcus reflected, was the power of truth. It stripped away pretense, revealing what lay beneath. No amount of money could buy back a shattered facade. The defense's case began with a carefully orchestrated parade of character witnesses, business leaders, charity directors, and social elites who painted James Montgomery as a pillar of the community. But something had shifted in the courtroom. The jury's expressions remained skeptical, unmoved by testimonials about Montgomery's generous donations and civic leadership. Mr. Montgomery has given millions to educational causes, the president of the Chamber of Commerce insisted from the witness stand. His philanthropy has transformed countless lives. Blood money, Emma whispered to Marcus from their usual seats. Wonder how many of Mom's stolen investments paid for those donations. Montgomery's lead attorney, David Patterson, worked to rebuild his client's image. Gone was the aggressive cross-examination style, replaced by a softer approach that portrayed Montgomery as a troubled man buckling under immense pressure. My client acknowledges some financial improprieties, Patterson told the jury. The stress of maintaining his company through the market crash led to regrettable decisions. But to suggest he orchestrated multiple murders? That strains credibility. The defense called a prominent psychiatrist who testified about executive burnout and temporary psychological breaks. Mr. Montgomery experienced a dissociative episode during the storm, the doctor claimed. His actions that night don't reflect his true character. But the prosecution's cross-examination was devastating. Doctor, Jen asked, does executive burnout typically involve creating detailed financial schemes over several years? Does it cause someone to disable security cameras before committing crimes? To take out insurance policies months in advance of accidents? The psychiatrist's credibility crumbled under her relentless logic. During the questioning, Marcus noticed several jurors shaking their heads. Patterson switched tactics, calling Bradley Montgomery, James's nephew, to testify about his uncle's dedication to family values. But the teenager's rehearsed speech about family loyalty backfired when Chen produced his social media posts, mocking Emma after her mother's death. Isn't it true, Chen pressed, that you helped your uncle cover up evidence by trying to remove student testimonials from the school's bulletin board? Bradley's smug facade cracked. Those stories were hurting the school's reputation. My family built Oak Ridge. Your family bought naming rights, Chen corrected. But the school was built by people like Marcus Johnson Sr., who maintained its buildings, by teachers who educated its students, by staff who saw the truth behind the donations. The defense's case suffered another blow when their financial expert was forced to admit that Catherine Montgomery's coded bank transfers couldn't have been coincidental. The mathematical probability of those specific numbers occurring randomly was astronomical. During a break, Marcus overheard Patterson arguing with Montgomery in a conference room. We need to consider a plea deal, the lawyer insisted. The jury's not buying the psychological defense. No. Montgomery's voice was cold. I have one more card to play. Get Bradley back on the stand. He knows what to say about Emma's mental state after her mother's death. But that plan imploded spectacularly when Bradley, under renewed questioning, admitted his uncle had offered to pay his full college tuition in exchange for testimony suggesting Emma was unstable and suicidal. He said to tell them she was obsessed with conspiracy theories. Bradley confessed, cracking under Chen's examination, that she blamed him for everything because she couldn't accept her mother's accident. The courtroom erupted. Judge Torres called for order as Montgomery lunged at his nephew, restrained by bailiffs. "You stupid boy," he shouted, "after everything I've done for this family." Marcus watched the scene unfold, remembering all the times he'd seen Montgomery's mask slip during board meetings and school events. The careful facade of philanthropy had hidden something poisonous, a man who saw people as assets to be managed or liabilities to be eliminated. Emma touched her mother's diary, which hadn't left her possession since her testimony. "He still doesn't understand," she said quietly. "Money can't buy truth. It can't silence it forever." The defense's final witness was Montgomery himself. He took the stand with rehearsed humility. His prison jumpsuit exchanged for an expensive suit that seemed to armor him in remembered privilege. "I loved Catherine," he claimed, his voice catching perfectly. "Everything I did was to protect our lifestyle, our family's legacy. Yes, I made mistakes with investments, but I never—" "Show the security footage," Chen interrupted. The courtroom screen flickered to life, showing crystal-clear video of Montgomery disabling cameras near the oak tree. His own maintenance records, meticulously documented by Marcus's father, proved he'd arranged for that specific camera to be down for repairs multiple times, always coinciding with suspicious incidents. "Explain this pattern, Mr. Montgomery," Chen demanded. "Explain how a man acting from temporary stress managed to orchestrate years of perfectly timed accidents. Explain how love involves plotting your stepdaughter's death to collect insurance, money." Montgomery's mask finally shattered completely. "You have no idea what it takes to stay on top," he snarled. "To maintain the standards people expect. Catherine would have ruined everything with her questions, and Emma, just like her. Mother, always digging, always watching." "Your Honor," Chen's voice cut through his rant, "the prosecution rests." As Montgomery was led from the stand, his expensive suit couldn't hide his transformation from respected businessman to exposed predator. In the gallery, Marcus and Emma exchanged glances. They had been invisible to him once, the janitor's son, the inconvenient stepdaughter. But their testimony, their truth, had revealed the monster behind the philanthropist's smile. Sometimes, Marcus reflected, justice comes not from power, but from those power overlooks. The jury's deliberation stretched into its third day. Marcus maintained his cleaning routine at Oak Ridge, but the school had transformed. Students gathered around smartphones during lunch, refreshing news sites for updates. Teachers incorporated discussions about justice and ethical responsibility into their lessons. Even the newest freshmen knew better than to litter in front of Marcus now. Respect had replaced invisibility. "They've asked to review your father's maintenance records again," Emma told him, as they met at their usual library table. She'd been keeping meticulous track of the jury's requests for evidence review, and Mom's diary entries from the month before her death. Professor Walsh, who had been grading papers nearby, looked up. "Those records tell the clearest story. Your mother's mathematical codes combined with Marcus's father's detailed documentation, it's impossible to dismiss as coincidence." Marcus nodded, remembering his father's voice. "Good records keep everyone honest, son. Today's details might be tomorrow's evidence." The afternoon sun slanted through the library windows, catching dust motes in golden light. 3 months had passed since the night of the storm, but its ripples continued spreading. Montgomery's arrest had triggered investigations at other private schools, revealing similar patterns of financial manipulation and covered-up accidents. Sarah Chen, still documenting everything for the school paper, joined them with her laptop. "Look at this," she said, pulling up a spreadsheet. "I've been analyzing Montgomery's donation patterns. Every major gift to the school coincided with suspicious deaths or accidents in his investment portfolio. He was literally funding scholarships with blood money. Blood money that's been frozen by the FBI," Professor Walsh added. "The school board called an emergency session this morning. They're worried about keeping Oak Ridge open without Montgomery's financial backing." Emma's face tightened. He's still trying to hurt people, even from jail. Still trying to prove his power? Maybe not, Marcus said thoughtfully. Dad mentioned something about the maintenance staff union. They've been talking to other school employees, starting a fundraising campaign, working people looking out for each other. Their conversation paused as Bradley Montgomery skulked past their table. The teenager had become a pariah since his testimony about his uncle's bribery attempt. Now he stopped, looking uncertain. "Emma," he said awkwardly, I'm sorry. About everything. About your mom, about helping Uncle James cover things up. I really didn't know about the murders. I swear." Emma studied him for a long moment. "But you knew something was wrong. You chose not to see it." "Yeah." Bradley stared at his expensive shoes. It was easier to believe the lies, to keep taking his money and pretending. "There's a difference between easy and right," Marcus said quietly. "My dad taught me that." Bradley nodded, then hesitated. The fundraiser the maintenance union is planning? Put me down for whatever I can give. It's not much. Uncle James controlled all the family money, but it's time I chose a different path. After he left, Sarah typed rapidly on her laptop. Speaking of different paths, the story about Oak Ridge is going national. People are calling. It's a wake-up call about privilege and institutional accountability. 3 other private schools have already implemented new safety oversight committees. Like ripples in a pond, Professor Walsh mused. One truth leading to another. Emma's phone buzzed. A text from Detective Martinez. Her hands shook slightly as she read it. The jury's coming back. They've reached a verdict. The next hour was a blur of movement. Students and teachers gathered in groups around phones and tablets, watching live coverage from the courthouse. Marcus and Emma sat with their families in the front row of the courtroom, watching Montgomery being led in for the verdict. The businessman had deteriorated further during deliberations. His expensive suit hung loose, his face gray and haunted, but his eyes still burned with that same cold calculation as he surveyed the jury. Members of the jury, Judge Torres intoned, have you reached a verdict? The forewoman stood, holding a single sheet of paper. The courtroom held its breath. In the matter of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant, James Montgomery, guilty. Emma gripped Marcus's hand. In the matter of the murder of Catherine Montgomery, we find the defendant guilty. Montgomery's facade cracked completely. He lunged toward the jury box, spittle flying as he shouted, "You think this changes anything? Money still rules. I made that school. I made all of you." "Remove the defendant," Judge Torres ordered sharply. As bailiffs dragged Montgomery away, his expensive shoes squeaking on polished floors, she turned to the jury. "Thank you for your service. Justice isn't always about what we can buy or sell. Sometimes it's about what we choose to see and what we do with that knowledge." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed with questions, but Marcus was watching Emma as she stood. In the late afternoon light, her mother's diary pressed to her heart, finally free of the shadows that had haunted her. "What happens now?" Sarah asked, still taking notes. "Now," Professor Walsh said firmly, "we build something better. A school based on truth and justice, not just money and influence." Emma smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. Mom would like that. She always said numbers don't lie. They just wait for someone brave enough to read them correctly. Marcus thought about ripples spreading, about invisible people choosing to be seen, about truth finding its voice in unexpected places. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest choices: to see, to speak, to stand. His father's hand settled on his shoulder, proud and strong. Together they watched Montgomery's empire of lies crumble in the summer sunshine, making way for something new to grow. Autumn painted Oak Ridge's campus in shades of gold and crimson as workers removed the Montgomery name from the science wing. Marcus watched from his usual cleaning route as the last letter fell, leaving only clean brick behind. The building would be renamed for Catherine Montgomery, a mathematician's legacy replacing a murderer's vanity. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" his father said, joining him by the window. "Sometimes healing starts with taking down the old to make way for the new." The school had changed profoundly in the months following Montgomery's conviction. The maintenance staff union's fundraising campaign had sparked something unexpected, a movement. Small donations poured in from working families across the city, each contribution a statement about the power of community over wealth. "Mr. Johnson?" A nervous freshman approached them, clutching a tablet. "I'm doing a project for Ms. Chen's new journalism class about the hidden heroes of Oak Ridge. Could I interview you both?" Marcus smiled, remembering when being noticed would have made him uncomfortable. Now he watched his father straighten his uniform with quiet pride. "Heroes is a big word," his father said. "We just did our jobs, kept good records, paid attention." "That's exactly what Ms. Chen says we should write about," the freshman pressed. "How ordinary people's choices can change everything." Sarah Chen had returned to Oak Ridge as a teacher after graduation, transforming the journalism program into a hub for student investigative reporting. Her first-year students were already breaking stories about inequality and corruption in other institutions. The interview was interrupted by excited voices from the main hall. Emma was giving her first campus tour as head of the new Student Safety Committee, leading a group of wide-eyed middle schoolers and their parents. Oak Ridge isn't just about academic excellence anymore, she was saying. We're building a community where everyone's voice matters, where truth and justice aren't just words in a mission statement. She caught Marcus's eye and waved. He'd never get used to seeing her like this, confident, purposeful, free from the shadows that had once haunted her. The insurance money from her mother's death had been recovered and transformed into a scholarship fund for students from working class families. And this, Emma gestured to Marcus and his father, is what real leadership looks like. The people who keep our school running, who see what needs to be fixed and fix it. The touring families looked at the maintenance workers with new eyes, seeing not invisible service staff, but essential members of the community. One parent raised her hand. I read about the Montgomery case, she said, about how maintenance records helped expose the truth. What changes has the school made since then? Marcus's father fielded that one. Every safety report now goes to multiple departments. We've got students and staff on oversight committees. No one person, no matter how wealthy, can override concerns about student welfare. Plus, Emma added with a slight smile, we've got Sarah Chen's journalism students watching everything. They're worse than security cameras. The group chuckled, but Marcus noted how the parents nodded approvingly. Oak Ridge's transparency had become a selling point, attracting families who valued ethics over exclusivity. Later, in the maintenance office, Marcus helped his father organize the day's work orders. The small room had become something of a legend, the place where truth had been preserved in careful records and quiet observation. Did you ever imagine this? Marcus asked, gesturing to their newly upgraded filing system, the computer database. That complemented their paper records. All those years of keeping notes. Did you know they'd matter so much? His father considered the question. Truth always matters, son. Sometimes it just needs time to grow. Like that oak tree out there, the new one we planted where the old one fell. Through the window they could see the young oak saplings swaying in the autumn breeze. The groundskeeping staff had planted it in a ceremony marking 1 year since. The storm. Its branches were still thin, but its roots were strong. A knock at the door revealed Professor Walsh and Emma carrying boxes of Thai takeout, their weekly dinner tradition. Got a minute for a working meal? Professor Walsh asked. The board wants to discuss expanding the scholarship program, Mom. Seems more families are choosing Oak Ridge specifically because of our new values. They cleared space on the desk, sharing spring rolls and pad thai as they reviewed proposals. The maintenance office had become an unofficial meeting spot for the school's new leadership, a place where hierarchies dissolved and real work got done. Bradley's starting an internship with the maintenance department next week, Emma mentioned between bites. Says he wants to learn what real work feels like. Marcus nodded. Montgomery's nephew had spent months rebuilding trust, volunteering for the hardest jobs, learning what his family's wealth had hidden from him. Outside, the setting sun painted the campus in warm light. Students lingered on the grounds, no longer segregated by wealth or status. Near the young oak tree, a study group had spread blankets on the grass. Scholarship students tutoring legacy kids, athletes helping artists with physics. You know what Mom would say about all this? Emma smiled, touching the locket that still held a page from Catherine's diary. She'd say it proves her favorite theorem, that truth is like mathematics. It doesn't care about power or money. It just waits for someone to solve the equation. Marcus looked around the small office where so much had changed, at his father's proud face, at the community they'd helped build from the ashes of Montgomery's influence. Sometimes the biggest victories come not from grand gestures, but from small choices repeated daily, to see, to record, to speak, to care, to make invisible things visible, one truth at a time. Winter settled over Oak Ridge like a clean white page, snow dusting the campus where students had once been divided by wealth and status. Marcus stood at his favorite window, mop in hand, watching Emma give a presentation to a state educational committee. Her voice carried through the conference room door, clear and confident. The Oak Ridge model isn't just about oversight, she was saying. It's about creating a culture where every voice matters, where truth isn't determined by power or privilege. The committee members, educators, and administrators from across the state leaned forward, taking notes. In the year since Montgomery's conviction, 5 other private schools had adopted similar reforms. The ripples kept spreading. "Mr. Johnson," a soft voice interrupted Marcus's thoughts. He turned to find Anna Martinez, Detective Martinez's daughter, holding a manila envelope. "Could you give this to your dad? It's my application for the summer maintenance internship program." Marcus smiled. The program, originally his father's idea, had become unexpectedly popular. Students from all backgrounds now competed for spots, learning the value of honest work and careful observation. "Planning to follow in my footstep?" he asked, only half joking. Anna's eyes were serious. "Someone needs to keep watching, right? Even after you graduate." That hit home. Marcus was a junior now, already fielding college recruitment letters. His essay about the Montgomery case had caught the attention of several journalism programs. But part of him wondered if his real education had happened behind that mop, learning to see what others overlooked. Inside the conference room, Emma was showing slides of Oak Ridge's transformation. The old oak tree stump had become a memorial garden with a plaque telling Catherine Montgomery's story. Students gathered there between classes, the space a reminder that truth eventually finds its voice. "The numbers don't lie," Emma concluded, displaying charts of improved student well-being and academic performance. "When we replaced fear with transparency, intimidation with accountability, everything changed." During the lunch break, Marcus joined Emma and their usual group at their library table. Sarah Chen was there via video chat from journalism school, where she was already winning awards for investigative reporting. "You're famous," Sarah teased, holding up a national education magazine with Oak Ridge on the cover. "The maintenance worker's son who changed private education." Marcus shook his head. "We all changed it. My dad's records, Emma's mom's diary, your articles. Truth needs witnesses, and sometimes witnesses need lunch," Professor Walsh announced, arriving with their favorite pizza. She'd been appointed head of the new Ethics and Oversight Department, transforming her mathematics expertise into tools for transparency. As they ate, Bradley Montgomery joined them, no longer an outsider, but not quite part of the inner circle. He'd earned a different kind of respect, working his way up through the maintenance department, learning what his family's wealth had hidden from him. "Got word from the prison," he said quietly. "Uncle James is trying to appeal again." Emma's hand went to her mother's locket, but her voice was steady. "Let him. The truth doesn't change just because he refuses to see it." Marcus watched her subtle show of strength, remembering the frightened girl from that stormy night. They'd all changed, grown into versions of themselves that fear had once hidden. His father's voice crackled over the radio. "Marcus got a special project. The state committee wants to see our record system." "Duty calls," he stood, but Emma caught his hand. "Remember when you were invisible?" she asked softly. "When we all were." He did remember. Remembered watching from behind his mop, seeing but not speaking, knowing but not acting. Remembered the moment when seeing became a choice, and that choice became courage. The afternoon sun broke through winter clouds, painting the library in warm light. Through the windows, Marcus could see students gathering at the memorial garden, leaving small tokens, pencils, notebooks, mathematical proofs, offerings to the power of truth. We were never really invisible, he realized. We just needed to learn how to be seen. Sarah's voice came through the laptop. "Deep thoughts from the janitor philosopher. That's going in my next article." They laughed, but Marcus caught his father watching from the doorway, pride and understanding in his weathered face. They'd kept their records, done their jobs, watched and waited until truth needed them. Now others were learning to watch, to record, to speak. The committee members touring campus, the students applying for maintenance internships, the working families, choosing Oak Ridge for its values rather than its prestige, all becoming witnesses in their own way. Emma stood to prepare for her next presentation, straightening the blazer she wore like armor. "You know what Mom would say about all this? That truth is like mathematics?" Marcus smiled. "No," Emma's eyes sparkled, "that sometimes the best equations are solved by people who aren't afraid to show their work." Outside, snow continued falling, covering the campus in pristine white. But underneath, roots grew stronger, the young oak tree reaching skyward, the community binding together, the truth spreading through countless small acts of courage. Sometimes change looks like revolution, Marcus thought. And sometimes it looks like a maintenance worker's son with a mop, choosing to see, to speak, to stand. Spring returned to Oak Ridge Academy, painting the campus in new colors. The young oak tree, now strong enough to stand without support, burst with fresh leaves. Beneath it, Marcus adjusted his graduation robe, the maintenance keys still jangling. In his pocket, a reminder of where he'd come from, of who he'd always be. "You're supposed to turn those in today," Emma teased, approaching in her own graduation regalia. Her valedictorian medals caught the morning light, academic achievement finally matching her innate brilliance. "Dad says I can keep them," Marcus smiled. "Honorary maintenance staff for life." They stood together under the young oak's branches, remembering its predecessor, the storm, the night that had changed everything. 2 years had passed since Montgomery's conviction, but his impact lingered in unexpected ways. Not in fear anymore, but in the safeguards and connections his actions had inadvertently created. "Hard to believe we're here," Emma said softly, touching her mother's locket. "Sometimes I still expect to wake up back in his house, trying to be invisible." "But you never were," Marcus's father approached, camera in hand. "None of us were. We just needed the right moment to be seen." The graduation ceremony would be different this year. Instead of wealthy trustees dominating the stage, the maintenance staff would have honored positions. Marcus's father would present diplomas alongside Professor Walsh, their roles equal in the school's new hierarchy. "Ready for your speech?" Professor Walsh joined them, straightening Emma's honors cords. "The press is here, including Sarah." Sarah Chen had become a rising star in investigative journalism, her coverage of the Montgomery case launching a career focused on institutional accountability. She waved from the media section, recording equipment at ready. Students and families filled the ceremony space, no longer separated by wealth or status. Near the front, Detective Martinez sat with her daughter Anna, who'd been elected to lead next year's maintenance internship program. Bradley Montgomery was there too, his maintenance department uniform pressed sharp under his dress jacket. "Look," Emma pointed to the back row, "they actually came." Marcus followed her gaze to a group of people wearing prison visitor badges, families of Montgomery's other victims, brought together by the truth Emma and her mother had helped expose. Their presence was both tribute and testimony. Justice delayed, but not denied. Headmaster Richards approached the podium. "Welcome to Oak Ridge Academy's commencement ceremony. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the journey that brought us here." The crowd stilled as he gestured to the young oak tree. 2 years ago, a storm revealed rot at our institution's heart, but it also showed us something more powerful than privilege or wealth. The courage of those who choose to see truth and speak it. Marcus felt Emma's hand slip into his as Richards continued. "Today we graduate students who learned more than academics. They learned that real character isn't bought or sold, that true leadership can come from any corner of our community, that sometimes the most important lessons are taught by those we once overlooked." The ceremony proceeded with new traditions. Each graduate received their diploma from both administration and maintenance staff, a symbol of the school's transformed values. When Emma stepped forward as valedictorian, her voice carried across the hushed crowd. "My mother was a mathematician," she began. "She taught me that numbers don't lie. They just wait for someone brave enough to read them correctly. But she taught me something else too, that truth needs witnesses, that seeing without speaking isn't enough, that real change happens when invisible people choose to be seen. She turned to where Marcus waited with his father. Some of those witnesses carried mops instead of medals. Some kept records instead of riches. But they all shared something stronger than fear, the courage to stand up, to speak out, to make truth heard. Marcus stepped forward for his diploma, his father's weathered hands passing him the leather folder. Their eyes met in shared understanding, remembering. Late nights organizing files, quiet conversations about dignity in work, lessons learned behind a mop. And so, Emma concluded, we graduate not just as students, but as witnesses, as voices, as proof that truth doesn't care about bank accounts or board seats. It simply waits for its moment, and for people brave enough to give it voice. After the ceremony, they gathered one last time at their library table. Sarah had set up her camera, documenting this final scene. For the record, she said, how does it feel? Changing not just a school, but the whole system. Marcus looked around at their unlikely family, Emma with her mother's strength, his father with his quiet dignity, Professor Walsh with her fierce intelligence, Bradley with his hard-earned humility. Even Detective Martinez had joined them, bringing news that Montgomery's final appeal had been denied. It feels, he said carefully, like we finally solved the equation, the one that proves truth plus courage equals change. Emma laughed. Mom would love that math. Outside, spring sunlight filtered through the young oak's leaves, casting dappled shadows on the memorial garden. Students lingered after the ceremony, adding their own small tokens, pencils, notebooks, maintenance records, pieces of truth. Marcus touched his keys one last time, feeling their familiar weight. He'd be leaving for journalism school in the fall, carrying these lessons to new places. But part of him would always be here, behind a mop, learning to see what others overlooked. You know, his father said quietly, some people think graduation means the story's over. But really, it's just the beginning, Emma finished. Because truth keeps finding new voices, new witnesses, new moments to be heard. They stood together under the young oak's branches, watching spring paint the campus in colors of hope. Sometimes the biggest changes start small, with a maintenance record, a daughter's courage, a witness choosing to speak. And sometimes, in the end, the most powerful truth is the simplest, that every voice matters, every story counts, and no one is truly invisible unless they choose to be.